Hello and welcome to Designer Discussions with Miriam, Jason, and Maria. Today we're going to talk about podcasting for interior designers.
Welcome to the Designer Discussions podcast. Tune in each week where we discuss marketing, branding, PR, and business advice for design professionals.
Are you wondering where to start marketing your interior design business? We are opening the Designer Discussions Marketing Studio, a monthly series of in-depth, actionable content to guide your marketing, PR, and business development. We want to help you transform your business and elevate it to work with your dream clients.
This is a topic that I've been asked about from a lot of designers. And actually, if you listen to episode 55, where we had Ariana on, she has a podcast. And so there's a lot of designers that I've been asked about, how do you podcast? What's the process? So we want to do an episode just on that. And we actually have a webinar on this. Within the show notes, we're going to have that webinar episode. And then today we're going to do a high level of what you need to know, what you need to do to have your own podcast. We're just going to start about, why is a podcast even important? One of the things that has happened really since the coronavirus is that audio format has blown up. So if you know anything about Clubhouse was new at the time. Over the year of 2020, it became $1 billion valuation just because of all that happened in 2020 because of coronavirus, and you were at home all the time, and audio. And podcast is one of the formats that also took off and blew up. One, they're low cost. Out of all of the marketing that you're going to do, podcast is one of the lower cost marketing avenues that you can take. I didn't say it's the easiest. I said it's one of the lowest costs. And it is time consuming, and we are going to get into that also. But in terms of cost, it's one of the lower ones. It's easier for your audience to consume the information, because a lot of the times when I hear people listening to podcasts, and me also, I'm listening to it either while I'm driving, working out, walking the dog, or I hear all type of things. So you don't have to stop your day to actually listen to a podcast. You can continue in your work. You could be at work listening to a podcast. So it's easier for your end user or your client to consume. And then also, it has a global reach. There are a few marketing avenues out there that once you put it out there, the whole world has access to it. We had talked about do's and don'ts for Facebook ads. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you want to have a global reach with Facebook ads, you better have a lot of money, because that's a whole nother realm. But with podcasts, once you have the initial podcast complete, once it's out there for everybody to see. So that is the advantages of having a podcast. We had talked also about hosting platforms, and there's a lot of hosting platforms out there now. We use Buzzsprout. Now, there's a lot of them out there. This is what we also had on the webinar, is to make sure you do your due diligence and research, because each of the platforms has its pluses and minuses. They each have their own costs. And it all depends on, as you'll always hear me talk about, know who your end audience is, who you're trying to market to. Do your research, do your due diligence, so you can pick the platform that's right for you. In terms of the equipment, I'm going to let Maria talk about that, because she actually has, you can see her microphone right there. So she could talk a little bit about if you're watching on the video aspect, but I'm going to actually have her talk about the equipment that she's using.
Awesome. So I don't know if Jason, if you're going to be able to link the exact mic that we have, but the mic that we use, you have to really speak directly into the top of it for it to gather the audio, which is excellent because it's not picking up anything else around the room. It's not picking up the animals in the background or the other people in the house. And this is not a very expensive microphone. There are a few other ones that the Shure mics are the ones that the professional podcasters are using, and those start in the $300 range. But the one that we have, we got off of Amazon, and we paid about $25, $30, I think, for the mic. And it works excellent. It sounds really, really good. I also have, you will want some kind of foam cover on your mic so that you don't get wind noise. I even have a little pop screen here so that you don't have to hear the sounds that come from someone's mouth when they're talking. And then I bought acoustical panels, and I have acoustical panels that look like bulletin boards in my office, but they're literally behind my desk, leaning up against my desk, because I didn't want the audio to be bouncing off of the walls and the doors that are in front of me and creating any kind of outside sounds that would kind of muddy things up. So a couple of acoustical panels that I bought online that look like bulletin boards for my office, and a good mic. And it's a USB mic that is hooked into the computer, and we just record on the computer. So it is minimal. It doesn't take up a lot of space. And so far, so good. I mean, I haven't had any complaints. And typically I'm the type of person that I would assume, because we have not super expensive equipment, that we would want to upgrade and move on to the next better and greater thing. But the reality is what we have available to us is great, and it's good. And I can pack it up when I need to go travel and still record whenever I'm not at home.
Yes. And one of the things that you are going to have to think about is, once you record the podcast, you're going to have to think about editing the podcast. And there's a lot of platforms out there. One of the ones that we use, and that was suggested to us also, is called Audacity. And that's a free software. It's on the Apple and it's on the PC as well. There's a lot of training that you could get on YouTube on how to use it. That's is how you edit the actual podcast. If you have guests on, a lot of the times you may have things that happen in between. So you may have to ask a question that they were not for sure about, and you want to edit some of the behind the scenes information out. So you will have to spend either some time if you edit it yourself, or some money to have somebody else edit it on your behalf. So that's one other thing you want to think about. When you start a podcast, and I'm going to let Mirjam get into this, you want to start with a theme. Like, what is it that you're wanting to podcast about? And I'm going to let her talk a little bit about a theme.
Yes. Well, I think there's two things, right? There's, what are you going to podcast about, and who is your audience? And for us, that was obviously quite simple, because we all work with the interior design community. So that is what that's our target audience. It's very, very targeted. But then we had to talk about what types of topics do we include, right? And obviously we're going to have marketing, PR, and Maria is our client communication expert. So those, and we have a little bit of business in it, but we're really very focused. And I think that's super important, because there are so many podcasts out there, and you have to be targeted. You have to really strategically think about who is your audience and what you're going to talk about, and then the format, and I know you'll talk about this too. It's like, are you just going to be talking? Are you going to have guests? Is it a mix of both? So there's just some planning that goes into it. And we went through our planning process very, very quickly. Actually, it was probably a couple of weeks, if that. It was very fast. So it can be done. I'm like, you don't need 6 months to think about what your podcast is going to be. You can just, decide today and launch 3 or 4 weeks later.
If you're already blogging and you have an audience and you're talking about, and you have all of this backlogged content of these great blog posts, this is a wonderful opportunity to repurpose that same content, but have it recorded in a different format and available in a different way.
And then one thing that you had touched on, Mirjam, was the show format, deciding on if you're going to do it all by yourself. We actually had Troy on episode 21, and he had talked about the pluses and the minuses of doing the show by himself. And he does a half-hour show every week. And he says sometimes it's hard for him to get up for it or to find what he's going to talk about, because it's him all the time, every time. So there's some pluses and minuses of that. Some of the minuses is if you have interviews, you have to schedule the interview with the people. Make sure your time lines up. Make sure that they have the right equipment, that everything sounds right. So it's, a little pluses, minuses with that. You want to have your show, how you want to have it produced and what that format looks like. But at the end of the day, great podcasts are all about storytelling. So you should have a story to tell that your audience wants to hear. And if you have that, you will over time develop a good podcast. I would say if you look at our earlier episodes, you'll see that we were unsure about a lot of things. Now you'll see a lot of the time we could jump into it and just start talking because now we know a lot of what we want to talk about. We're at the start, we were unsure, like, well, I think we want to talk about this, how we want to do that, whatever. But over time, it's all about consistency. And there was a tweet that I saw which blew me away. Of the 2 million podcasts, 90% of them stop after 3 episodes. 90%. You heard me right. 90% of the podcasts stop after 3 episodes. And I'm telling you, this is some work. So when I've read that, I'm like, wow, 3 episodes and you're done. That's crazy. 90% of that number stops after 20 episodes. So if you get to 21 episodes, you're in the top 10% of podcasts in the world. So all you got to do is get to 21 episodes. I know it sounds easy, but if you're consistent, and that's about almost anything in life, consistency. If you have consistency, you will grow your audience and you'll have some fruit at the end.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it really is a fun thing to do. Yeah,
it is. I like it. We like that we have each of us to lean on and help with each one of our episodes. But realistically, like you could even do it seasonality. Like you could have, do 10 episodes and call it, one season, and do 10 episodes and do another season, and give yourself large breaks between your publishing of your episodes, as long as you're upfront about how consistent you're going to be and you do follow through with something that people can rely on. It doesn't necessarily have to be a 52 episodes a year thing for you.
It's rare that most podcasts are not weekly, like the more niche ones.
Mm-hmm. And how we handle ours, what helps us out is that we batch a lot of our episodes. So we're ahead of time. So this episode here was, even though it's airing on a certain date, it was taped about a month or 6 weeks ahead of time. Mm-hmm. So we're able to batch a lot of episodes. So if we need to take time off, we can. And so that's just something else that you can do as well. So, and I will add, this is fun. Now, I don't know how much fun it would be if I was to handle all of this on my own all the time. I don't know how much fun that would be.
Not as much fun.
I'm going to go
a lot less fun.
But there are people out there like Troy, like I had talked about Troy, that can handle it. So it's just really up to you. What is your personality like? Who is your audience? Will they resonate with you? And do you have a lot to say? So some people like to be the only one on their podcast, but it's just to each his own. So what is right for you may not be right for the other. So we actually have a checklist that you'll find within the show notes that has all that we talked about. You'll have the link to the webinar we did that has more information there. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions at all. And we hope to see you all here next week on Designer Discussions.
Are you ready to get serious about your marketing? We're opening the Designer Discussions Marketing Studio, a monthly series of in-depth, actionable content to guide your marketing, PR, and business development. We want to help you transform your business and elevate it to work with your dream clients.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Designer Discussions. What was your takeaway? Care to share your thoughts and tag Jason, Maria, and Mirjam on social media? You can find them on all platforms at designerdiscussions.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review or comment for this episode from wherever you are listening.